Okay, so today we have something very exciting happening. We have our very first free online workshop, and we have it with the amazing Shea. So, oh, here she is. Hi, Stephanie.
Hello.
Hello. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thank you. Can everyone hear both Shay and myself? Anyone that's in the comments, can we make sure we can hear each other? Alex and Steph, I'm relying on you too. Yes,
Yes,
perfect.
great.
Okay, we'll get started. So Shay, do you want to introduce yourself? Do you want to tell everyone watching a little bit about you and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here. I think this is a really great, innovative way to connect people, right, when we're all in isolation. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm Shay. I'm an actor and performer, but I'm also the artistic director of a company called Indigo Arts Collective. Um, Fast-paced timeline of sort of my journey. I guess I grew up performing and training in and around New York City when I was a kid. So I had sort of an early entrance into what that world looked like. And it was always sort of what I knew I wanted to do. So I ended up going to university in New Orleans in the States. I got a BFA in theater performance. I also got a bachelor's in communications, and I minored in dance. And then I was like, well, I need to act. So I obviously have to move to Los Angeles. So I moved to Los Angeles. And I was there for 5 years. And continued training, taking classes at some companies in the city. And I got to work a lot in theater, a little bit in film and television. I directed children's theater. I taught dance. I did some freelance writing. So lived that life for 5 years. And then came to London to go to East 15. So I got my MFA from East 15 in acting. And as I was finishing up that course, I decided I was going to stick it out and stay in the UK for a while and try out this market. But I realized, I didn't have a network here, and I was sort of starting from scratch. And sort of out of panic and sort of out of ambition, I figured I just had to make my own work so that I had work when I graduated. So that's what I did. I wrote a play, started a company to produce my play, and toured it. And last summer I did a 3-city tour of New York, Los Angeles, and London.
Amazing.
So that was that. And then from there, I sort of got the bug of filling this actor, producer, practitioner role, and was really
Mm-hmm.
getting excited about making my own work. So I'm currently finishing up a master's in contemporary performance practices at the University of East London, where I've been focusing still partially with research as practice, but also a little more academic approach to creating work, and focusing more on learning about how to write grant applications and how to develop my marketing strategy and things like that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, can I first of all just point out that you're going to have more degrees by the time you're finished, like the fingers on your hands, like that is just incredible. Like that is amazing. Um, but well, a question that I hadn't actually planned, but what would you say the biggest difference is between um like the not just the market over in the States compared to here, but like actually trying to get work in the States in comparison to here? Would you say there's a major difference, or would you say it's easier in one place than another? What's your opinions of it?
I mean, I think that's a great question. I think part of it really depends on what your home market is. I know for me, my experience in Los Angeles, I felt very fortunate. I moved out there right out of university. I found representation. I started getting work, and I did a lot of theater work that was really fulfilling. And I found myself, once I built a network, kind of easily going from project to project. And some of them were just stipended, some of them were full paid contracts. So I wasn't living, a life of luxury, but I was always engaged in creative work, and I felt really grateful for that. I think here it's a little bit different because this isn't my home market. So I've found it a little more difficult, but I think because it's newer to me and it's just a little bit more difficult to navigate. What I do love about over here, as somebody, I really love school, if you can't tell, and I really
Yeah.
like to approach things from a very cerebral way. And I found that in Los Angeles, it didn't really matter to anybody whether or not you had a degree. I was really proud coming out of my undergrad with my BFA and was like, oh, now I can take on the world. And people were like, you could have moved here when you were 18 and you would have been younger. And if, you know what I mean? So that was disappointing in that sense. And I think over here, I really love the appreciation for the work and for the training, and the sense that putting in that time gives you some value as an artist. Whereas I think in the home market, certainly lots of people appreciate it, but it's not necessarily as core a part of what you bring to the table, I think, as an artist necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. In that sense then, what do you wish that you were told in both scenarios? What do you wish that someone had, like, what's the tip you wish that someone had told you both when you were in the States and then when you moved over here and started training here? Like, what are the tips that you wish someone had told you for both the States and here?
It's a great question. I think for me, I think especially early on in training, there's a lot of focus on like choosing what you are. So you're an actor, or you're a director, or you're a dancer, or you're whatever you are. And for me, as somebody who very young had sort of a lot of interests, I found it very challenging to sort of decide. And I felt like when I went to university, I had to decide that I was just going to be an actor, right? And I was going to continue my other things peripherally, but I had to sort of give up other parts of my creative identity, because that sort of showed your level of commitment. And I think from a training perspective, it is really important to have a clear definition and focus. I think that's key to you getting the most out of your training. But I think once you leave training spaces and enter workspaces, you need to hang on to that foundation you built in that single discipline, but you also need to embrace and accept your interdisciplinary capacities. Because that's really, I mean, I found when I first moved out to LA, I was getting work in musical theater, and then I was doing a Shakespeare play, and then I had a television audition, and then I was choreographing something, and I was like, oh, I have to tell these guys that I'm just a choreographer. I have to tell these guys that. And then finally I realized I didn't actually have to do that. I could embrace the different facets of who I was as an artist. And I think that's really key. And I personally found that hard to sort of let go of that mindset. But it gives you more options for work, right? And that's the goal. I'd rather be working in 4 different artists' jobs than one and in a restaurant if I had the choice. You know, I'd like to be making all of my work creatively. So I think that's a big tip.
I'm sure that you would agree. So I recently had a conversation with someone. Oh, I'm so glad you've got tea. I was going to call this segment Tea with C.
That's brilliant.
So glad you've got tea.
Cheers.
Okay. Anyway, such a random segment. I was recently told, so I had an acting through song workshop with someone who has been heavily based in the West End of London, and it was fantastic. And she, at the very end of our kind of session, was asking me about, like, what am I doing throughout lockdown? Am I staying creative? Am I not just focusing on the one thing? Because she said to me that in this industry now, people want like a businessman, people want a businesswoman, people want someone who is like not just one string to their bow, like that has so many different things that they could offer to someone. For example, just as what you've just said, a choreographer, a director, a producer, an assistant, even being in the play, what you studied, like so many different things that you could offer to someone. I think that's such a great point to go forward. Don't just stick with, so for instance, I trained in musical theatre. So I have recently learned not just to stick with that one bracket. I'm kind of trying to delve into directing and writing lyrics and producing a play and different. So I'm trying to expand that, and I've only found better things to come back from it. So if anything was to come from like that tiny point of conversation, it would be just to add more strings to your bow and keep building on who you are. Don't think that when you've graduated and okay, I've got an honours degree, don't think that that's you stopped learning. You will always continue to learn even after you've graduated. I think you do most of your learning after you graduate.
Absolutely. And I think too, I know, sometimes it might be like a crisis of confidence if you're like, well, I only trained in X, and how am I somebody that has the authority to do Y? But when you look at the way we make work as artists, right? As a musical theater performer, you're in the room with professional directors and professional choreographers and musical directors.
Mm-hmm.
So you're actually trained in peripherally in those disciplines as well, because you're watching professionals work all the time, and that's how we learn. So when we take a step back and look at it from that perspective, I think it's really empowering to realize that we're in this unique position to kind of have quite a lot of knowledge that qualifies us to at least give something a shot, right? We don't need to start off day one saying we're the number one expert in something we haven't studied, but you can
Absolutely.
embrace that you're someone who's entering it from your perspective. And I think as people that are grounded primarily as performers, I always think it's really nice to have directors who have been on the opposite side of things as well, because that sort of, you've been in the shoes of the people that you're working with, and that can really create a really holistic approach to creating work, I think.
Yes. Let me move on to the questions that I've got written down. So I just wanted to ask, how did you become involved in the creative arts industry? So if we talk way back when, if you were a teeny bopper, you were a little kid, when did things first spark as such for you?
My entry was really through dance. My mother put me in dance classes when I was 18 months old. And so I have no memories before dance, really. I mean, I do not remember a time when I wasn't going into a studio and practicing. And I think that discipline and that culture and getting to train sort of under the same studio director from the time I was 18 months old till the time I was 18, with kind of a core company of people was really great. And because we were so close to the city, we had opportunities, like we performed at Madison Square Garden and Lincoln Center, and we got to go be in these real big professional spaces as tiny people.
Wow.
So
Okay.
seeing that and feeling that was possible, because I was there, so it was possible, like, I think helped me, understand that was my track and that was something that was achievable, and it sort of set me on that goal. So I started training in voice as well when I was like 8, and I did all of my school plays, and then I started more like focused acting training when I was in middle school and high school. Directed stuff at my school, choreographed stuff for my studio company, and started like building a little body of work for myself quite early on. So yeah, I mean, that's the answer. I was sort of gifted it by my parents, very fortunately.
I mean, I think the fact that you've touched on when you were so young, you got to perform in all these amazing places. I think that is a point in itself. So even if you don't get the chance to perform, so I'll take it in like I'm Scottish, so let's take it in a Scottish perspective. So we have this big place called the Hydro, and it's kind of like you're like a stadium, like an arena kind of thing. And so it would kind of be like performing in somewhere like that, or somewhere like Wembley if you're English. But even if you don't perform in somewhere like that, take small gratitudes in performing in like your local art centre that has the most amazing stage. Like take everything from that, because if you feel like you're at home when you're on a stage, I think you know where your path is. I have so many people say to me, because I've been quite fortunate in that I have had the amazing opportunity to perform in all these like really big venues, but when someone asks me like, what is your favourite performance experience, mine's is from like when I was small and I was only in a local art centre, but it's because at that point I knew that that's what I wanted to do. So it was like you're saying, it's those small pleasures which were really, really lovely. The next question, how did you set up your own company? And do you have any advice for individuals who'd be interested in doing the same sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, in terms of the logistics of setting up a company, and this is something I sort of run workshops about and stuff, it sort of depends on do you want to be, is it something you're doing independently? Do you want to set it up as a charitable organization? Sort of the logistics of it depend on the needs and the goals of you and your team. But in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like vision and action, I sort of have like my 4 really easy secret steps that I talk to people about, which is know who you are, know what you want to do, articulate it well, and make it happen. And that sounds really easy, and obviously it's not as simple as it sounds, but it also kind of is, right? So knowing who you are is a really big, complicated question. Really, it sounds simple, but it takes a lot of time. And again, I have like exercises and things like this that we don't have the time to do today, but are a resource if anyone wants to reach out. But I think just being realistic about what that is, like the definition of who you are, and being fluid, and not just
Mm-hmm.
defining yourself by your discipline, right? So defining yourself as like where you're positioned in the world. You're a woman in your 20s who's from another country and living abroad, for example, or whatever it is that kind of is your uniqueness. What
Mm-hmm.
is that? And identify that for yourself, and know that that can change, right? And be honest. If you want your identity to be something, but it's not that, work you generate based on that false identity isn't going to be authentic. So that's number 1. I think number 2, knowing what you want to do also takes like a little bit of leveling down, because you can say, oh, I want to start a company, or I have an idea for a play, but that's not really knowing what you want to do, right? Knowing what you want to do is saying like, I want to create a shadow puppetry piece that explores the cultures of like the Irish diaspora in America. Or I mean, it doesn't have to be that specific, but
Yeah.
it's helpful. The more specific you can make it, the better. And that specificity doesn't have to be what your whole company is about, but that's going to be the crux of where you start your first creative project. So from there, right, you can say, okay, I want my work to be interdisciplinary. I want it to exist in alternative spaces. I want to make work that engages communities, right? And you can start building those specific goals that are going to shape what makes your company different from everyone else's company. And I'd say that
Mm-hmm.
you can really live in those first 2 steps for quite a while before you make any movement, because it's
Yeah.
harder to redefine your company once you sort of launch it into the world.
Yeah.
Not super difficult, not impossible, but it's nice to really sort of stew on what you're trying to create and where it's coming from, I think, before you launch.
Set it free. Yeah. So much
Yeah.
easier to keep something and expand it. And I think people, I think that's why so many like pieces of work or so many companies don't actually set off, because people are obsessed with the getting everything right. Sometimes that is the best thing for it. Sometimes the best thing is to fail at something, because then you learn something and you learn what not to do. You learn how to do things better. So sometimes the failing is the best thing that you could actually do. Like, don't obsess over the
Oh,
first thing so
absolutely.
much that you can't let it go.
Yeah. I think the
But
growth happens in the doing, because you can get
yeah,
really caught up in the, but I think having a clear idea and having spent the time to think about it and how it anchors in you, then that really gives you the confidence that when you propel out, even if it's not successful, you're like, well, I thought about it. It was truthful to me. I gave it a go. And now I know what to do moving forward. And I think
yeah,
asking for feedback is important too. Like if you're, even if it's just like a little reading with friends, go in with maybe some specific questions that you'd like feedback on, not just like, what did you think? Because that's kind of helpful,
yeah,
but it's more helpful if you're like, oh, in, scene 2, what did you feel about this moment? Or so sort of be open to, I can kind of be scared to do that, because sometimes you're asking the question because an area might need work. So the answers you get
yeah,
back might be confirming your fears. But
yeah,
that's really helpful. And I think that's a key skill, to be able to um, ask for feedback and to receive it in a way that's going to help you grow rather than shut you down, I think is something that's
yeah,
good to get in the practice of as well.
yeah. Take the criticism well, but sometimes it's not criticism. Sometimes it eventually helps in order to grow something to be better. That's
Yeah.
the way I look at
And know what to
it.
throw out, right? If you're getting something that
Oh yeah,
that you don't feel, I mean, particularly right when it comes to like getting formal reviews and things like that, you know, you're at the end of the day sort of the barometer of the work that you make. So if something doesn't feel useful, you don't have to apply it. Just have the presence of mind to be able to identify, ooh, am I not liking that because it makes me feel icky, or, oh, I don't like it because I don't think it serves the work. So I think that's
Yes.
useful too.
Yes. Next question. What advice would you give to anyone studying or graduated within the industry on defining who they are? And I'll put who they are in these little things, both as a performer and within the industry.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think be honest with yourself, and know how to articulate who you are. So it's one thing to know internally, it's another thing to be able to write it out in a few sentence blurb, right? And particularly when creating work, I know for me, right, when you go to a festival and you have a huge program with all of this great work in it that all kinds of people have worked really hard on, if I'm reading through and I read the blurb and it's really general, or it doesn't feel like I'm not engaged with it, it doesn't excite me, if I don't know what I'm going to see, me personally, I'll keep flipping. And even if it's something that I don't really like, I'm not a huge sports person, right? But if it's the difference between a byline that's a coming of age story set in the countryside, or like one young man takes on the challenge of his life in his basketball, like, I'd be more interested in that, even though I don't really care about the subject, than something that doesn't feel clear. And I think the same thing goes for people presenting themselves, right? Like saying, like, I'm a trained actor who works on X and Y is useful for somebody in casting who's looking for a project. But adding some personal flair to that is much more interesting. And I think there's the line too of doing that in a way that doesn't feel braggy, right? Or pushy, right? So it's not necessarily that you're going to list all of your top credits in your byline or in your presentation of yourself, but something that's sincere and authentic that sets you apart a little bit, I think is key. So whatever that is for you, I think is important to assess and then create. And it comes down to like copywriting skills too. You could be a brilliant performer, and if you don't have copywriting skills, you might not be able to present yourself in the way you want to. And either you can independently work to build those skills, or find somebody who already has them and partner with them to help you. There's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
You know, like you said earlier, lately there's been all this talk about performers also being expected to be business people and producers, and that's not what we did. We just studied acting for however many years. So nobody gave us those skills. So if you don't have them, I think be able to say, I don't have them, and work on them or ask for help. I think that's key too. And feeling okay about that.
I think one of the other major things that, like, well, I'm saying that I'll say I forget as a performer. See, especially if I'm trying to reach out to someone who I think has more of a stature than me, or like a casting director, or someone important in my eyes, I often forget that they also are people. So if I was writing an email, I would make it so like trying to be so professional the whole way through. Whereas in actual fact, you should just be a person. Like, they are more likely to engage with another human being than a robotic email. It's just a fact. They're more likely to have, even if it's not a warm email back, they're still more likely to engage with you. They might send back a robotic email, but that might just be their style. But either way, you're still getting a response, and that's better than nothing.
Exactly. And I think as long as you're being, I think, people spend a lot of time focusing on like, oh, what is the correct way to write an email to somebody and blah, blah, blah. And obviously, as long as you're acknowledging, like, you're using correct language and you're being respectful and you're including all the information they need, beyond that, making it your own is what's going to be useful. And I think, I mean, the same thing goes for, I think when you're first starting out and creating work, it's useful to find people on that level, like just directly above you, who have like just started out themselves and are doing the things that you imagine you might be doing in a year. And I think asking for help there is really useful also. And I think the way that you do it is really important, right? So, for example, if somebody is reaching out because they want information on getting press coverage for their show, person A who says, oh, hey, I saw that your last show, you got a lot of coverage, congratulations. could you give me some tips on how to draft a press release or how to, you know, submit to news outlets? I'm much more likely to respond to person A than person B who goes, do you have any reviewer contacts? Right? So I think too, partially, and then follow up, right? So if in that scenario, the company gets back to you and they give you some whatever, and then you end up putting their ideas into practice and you get someone for your press night, send them a message and go, hey, thank you so much for your tips. I really appreciated something specific that they shared with you, right? And I got this person to come to my press night. Awesome, thank you. Because person A, I'm then going to look for opportunities to help in the future.
Yeah.
As opposed to person B, who I'm going to be like, oh, what? And maybe I'll have time to get back to them. But even if I do, I'm not as invested in continuing to support their journey. So I think lots of artists, I mean, certainly I feel really eager to mentor people that have questions and want to know how I'm doing things. And I think in my experience, most people are that way. But figure out your approach and make sure you go about it in a way that's going to, you know, continue to be beneficial for you, I think.
Yes. I found out, well, I didn't find out. I have always been a kind of keen believer that even if someone, so for instance, I always mention an audition environment. In an audition environment, you will always get the people who are really in the game, as in they walk into the audition room and they're so heavily invested, they don't kind of interact with the other people in the room or the person that's walking them to the audition. And sometimes that can come off really negatively. Sometimes it can come across like they are not a people person, disinterested, kind of stuck up because they didn't like engage with anyone at all. So the biggest feedback I've ever had has always been about my kindness. As in, a casting director would say to me, thank you so much for coming in and being so kind and warm. You were really great with the pianist. You were so kind. That is the key word here. If you are kind to someone, they are so much more inclined to, one, help you, and two, cast you. Like,
it makes such a big difference. And like,
it's so simple.
I think too, especially, and I can't speak to this as much in the UK, but certainly when I was in Los Angeles, what I found is after a while, I wasn't really auditioning for stuff as much. I was more being like brought in for stuff because I had worked with people before. They knew what I could do. They had enjoyed working with me, and that was an easy fix. And I've done like very, very minimal casting, but the casting I have done has been the same thing. I've looked at my network. I've said, like, who has the skills, but who's going to be a contributing member of this ensemble, right? And who's going to, like, because the energy of your group makes such a big difference. And someone could be the best person in the world, but if they're bringing down the vibe, it's going to impact the work. So I think that's a really essential point.
Yeah. Let's go on to the next question. Do you have any tips for lockdown? Do you have any tips for remaining like creative? Do you have any tips for, like, do you happen to know of anything that is happening that people can get involved in? Do you know of just kind of that wide range? How do we survive this as a creative person?
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm writing an article sort of about this right now, for like an online journal, but I think it's tough, right? Because I think the bottom line is that everybody needs to be taking care of themselves and their loved ones, but I think especially their mental health and their well-being, and really focusing on self-care. So I want to put that forward first as a caveat, so that any other advice that I give is like, once you've positioned yourself in a safe, comfortable place, then I think it's good to be embarking on some creative projects. But if that doesn't feel like it's going to serve you, I wouldn't worry about it. Because even though things are really uncertain and this time feels like kind of a pressure cooker for creativity, and there's this feeling like we all have to generate our best, most genius work because that's what Shakespeare did, and like we better do it now, I think that can be really stressful, and we don't need the extra pressure. So you can throw that out. But I think what's useful, for me, right, like I recently did a project called the Sonic Response series. I got 154 performers from all over the world. I just kind of put it out on my social media channels and got some, I have like international networks, right, obviously, so I got a really cool pool of people. And they each generated their own 3-minute artistic response. And I put it on a virtual gallery, and it's streaming now, and it's interesting if you want to check it out. But I think the logic for that was I didn't want to make fake theater, right? Like, I love theater, and to me the magic of theater is being there, right? Like, I had a professor in my undergrad who said literally the vibrations of your sound on stage are physically touching the audience. Like, it's a physical engaged space. And that always stuck with me, that idea, and I thought that was really powerful. So that to me is what theater is. I didn't want to make theater online. I think other people do, and that's the prerogative of people as practitioners. I'm not saying that that's not good. I think that's brilliant in its space if that's the kind of work you make. But for me, that's not sort of the kind of work that I make, and I wanted to explore how we occupy different spaces in this time, right? So like the internet is a space that we all occupy socially all the time, and we use it for work, and we use it for all these different things. We don't usually use it as our primary form of entertainment. So I wanted to play with how we could occupy the internet space in a different way. So that's one option, is like, look at what's around you and challenge how we make work. Ask, like, what is an audience? What is performance? What is my focus as a practitioner? And be nimble, right? So for me, part of my company's mission is to create collaborative work for communities in crisis. So I was like, cool, well, this fits with my mission. I just need to shift a little bit. I'm going to create a virtual community instead of going into a real community. I think also it's a good opportunity to try out the things that you don't normally have time for. I think we all have that like creative list of like for me, it's like I used to play guitar and I never really got that good. I was only like, okay. And I have it. So the bottom of my creative list is always like, get back to playing guitar, right? And we have these things in the back of our heads, and we don't have time for them. So I'd say take stock of your rainy day creative list and go through it. And that's useful too, because it could be you've had it in your mind forever that you wanted to do X, and then you try it out and you realize, actually, it's not that exciting for you. And then you can cross it off your list. Or it's the most exciting thing, and then you can dive into that in this time. So I think try different things, I think, is my advice.
If you need some help with the guitar, I can help you.
I do. I need help.
I can help. We'll chat after this.
We'll chat, yeah.
It'll be like Phoebe from Friends when she's trying to teach Joey how to play the guitar. You know, when she tells him like all the different shapes or like iceberg. Like that's what it'll be like.
That might help.
How do you think the industry will be impacted after lockdown? And in your opinion, what can we do to help improve the industry throughout this time? Obviously, you've touched on it there, as in when someone picks up their rainy day list and learns how to play the guitar, they don't know the impact that is going to have, as in you don't know if by you playing the guitar, so for instance, if you have the perfect casting for something but you don't play guitar, however, throughout this time, if you learned how to play the guitar and you went into that casting audition or went into that room and suddenly guitar appeared on the TV of Spotlight, they would then be like, we don't need to cast anymore, she is the one. So in that sense, you will never know the impact of something, as in you will never know if taking that online singing lesson will help you get that job. You will never know unless you try all these things. But yeah, in your opinion, what will happen with the industry, and what can we do to help make it better, or help everyone get throughout this time?
Yeah, that's a great big question. I think in terms of the industry, I mean, theater has been around since like ancient times, and I really don't think it's going anywhere. I think the logistics of how we clean things and how we gather might need some adjustment, but I'm not concerned personally. I know there are all sorts of articles around now about the future of kind of every industry and how it's going to be changed forever. And I think for a lot of things that might be true, but I think we can always sort of count on theater existing. I think in terms of our lives as performers, there was already a big uptick in self-tapes being a way that things were cast. I think this time has showed us that like we can really do a lot of casting off of self-tapes, and there really is something obviously to being in the room, but I think that's what a callback is for. I think we might see an increase in self-taping as like the predominant way that we audition, especially I think once things start to open again, because just gathering all those people in a room waiting to be seen their headshots won't save them. You know what I mean? Like it's still a big space.
Yeah.
So I think that's something we might see. But I think as well, probably we'll see a lot of people generating their own work more because they've been without it, right? We've been without the opportunity to practice and perform and do what we want to do. So I think a lot of people will start making their own work to fulfill that need. And then when we're all set free, there's going to be all of this work. I think my hope, you know, it's tricky right after a big event like this because sometimes then all the work that's being made is in response to what just happened. And then we continue living in this like COVID world where the next like 20 fringe festivals we go to is all just plays about, which I mean, like, I think is fine too.
We're trying not to. Car Crash as a company, we already have a pretty set and kick-ass plan, if I might say so myself. And it just, so everything from this year's Fringe is being carried over. However, we're also planning some pretty great things. So I hope that next year's Fringe, that I think there's going to be such a need for it. There's going to be such a need for like comedy and love and togetherness, and see, because we haven't had it, like we've not even had human contact. See, even just to walk up to someone in the street and hold their hand, like it's going to be insane. Like hold a stranger's hand. That should be a new challenge when this is all finished. Tell a stranger, hold a stranger's hand and tell them that they matter. Tell them that they are important. That's going to be like, it's going to be a huge thing when this is all finished.
I mean, I think everything is going to have so much more meaning. You're exactly right. So I hope that we see a lot of work that's coming out of the meaning of what this time has made us consider, rather than 500 plays about us all being sad in our homes, because we all just lived that. We don't need to see it again. I think anyway.
I'd thought of something there. Well, as a creative yourself, I had come up with an idea to kind of do like a self-tape challenge. Alex, who's watching, she took part in a self-tape challenge. So I would love to spread it across as many kind of forums as possible. And so we'd send out a brief and then people would just send them back in, because not only is this going to help, as in, for instance, if we send out a panto brief and then they get a brief in from their agent that's the exact same thing, they won't need to self-tape. And we'll give them feedback that they might never get from a casting director or their agent. We might say to them, try and get better lighting, try and record in somewhere where it's got better sound. So I would love to do that if you're up for it.
Yeah, send all the info my way and I can share it with my network as well.
Amazing.
And something else actually. Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I just really quick. You asked me earlier about things people could do, and I forgot to mention this. My show is in a festival right now called the Online Fringe Festival, which for anyone out there in the world that has a recording, like a quality recording of a previous Fringe production that they've done, you can submit to it, like submit to the festival as if you were submitting to a regular festival, but then you send your recorded version, and they're curating, I think it's about like 6 shows a week. So my show's been on since Monday. It finishes on May 3rd, and every week there are 6 new shows that you can watch. So it's great to watch, but it's also great to submit if you have archived shows lying around, just to sort of, I know like I was supposed to be going to Edinburgh, I think you guys were as well, so we now don't have that, but you could put the work someplace else, at least to sort of get some eyes on it and to continue to get feedback on it.
Absolutely. Well, I'll get all that information from you and I'll make sure it's all up on our profile so that anyone watching, I'm just seeing that Alex is saying, and Molly, we'll definitely save it for you guys. Just to finish off, do you happen to know the programme Graham Norton?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so we are basically going to do a red chair challenge. You know, the thing at the very end where they pull the lever, where you
don't know what that was.
Okay, so basically you have to tell us and everyone else that will watch this later or right now, you have to tell us a story, and basically the aim of the game is to be able to get up and walk off your chair, whereas if the story isn't the best story that you could possibly come up with, we get to pull the lever and you basically go flying over your head. I know that obviously can't happen, but if you could be as dramatic as possible, that would be amazing.
Okay, so the goal is that I'm telling an engaging fictitious story, real story?
I mean, you're an actor, so it could be a lie, but we would never know.
You would never know. Okay, so I just have to
Tell,
tell you.
just tell us the best, funniest, or weirdest story that you can come up with.
Okay, we ready?
Yes, go.
So, lived in New Orleans. They have lots of crazy weather. Hurricane comes, I evacuate to Texas, as you do, right? Grew up in New York, don't know a lot about the South, go to Texas. Driving to Texas with my friend who's from San Francisco, and we decide we're going to go to a county fair because that's like an American thing to do that sounds really exciting that I never experienced. So we go to the county fair, and I'm so stoked because we're going to see animals and we're going to drink sweet tea, and it's going to be like a Lifetime original movie. And it is not that at all. People with like, they don't have shoes on, they're missing teeth, the animals all look really sad and they're being sold for people to eat them, and I'm a vegan, and like, no, not good. So we leave. Our lemonade wasn't even good. Fine, we go to leave, and there's a man in cutoff denim shorts selling baby turtles out of the back of his truck. And they're like this big, like bright green, like baby turtles. I'm not a turtle expert. The man tells me that they are miniature turtles and they're going to stay that size forever, except it was more like this here miniature turtles, and I promise you they're going to stay this size. And I was like, oh my God, I'm sold. Take all of my money. Give me the turtles. May or may not have been drinking at the fair as well. So take the turtles. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. They're going to be my friends for life, and this is going to be incredible. I named them Tennessee Williams and William Shakespeare. We put them in the car, and then we have to like stay in Texas for another few days because like there was still a hurricane, so I couldn't go home. So I didn't really think it through. Fast forward, hurricane's over, drive the turtles back home, set them up in a tank. They're going to live the best life, put them on my bookshelf. Studying one day at my desk a few weeks later, I hear this sound. And I look, nothing. I hear, and I look. My turtle is turtle sneezing, and I lose it. I'm like, he's sick. What am I going to do? I call one of my friends. She drives me to a specialist turtle vet that I real quickly Googled. We show up. My turtles have pneumonia because turns out they're just regular turtles. They're not miniature magic turtles that stay healthy and small forever. They're real giant ass turtles that grow big and have health needs. So I then am told by this lovely veterinarian woman in Louisiana that my turtles are going to need daily injections of their medication so they do not die from turtle pneumonia. Now, again, like animal loving, crazy person. She said, well, you can come back every day and we can do it for X amount of money, or you can take the medication home with you and do it yourself. And I'm a university student. We drove 30 minutes, 40 minutes to get to this vet. I was like, give me the needles, give me the turtle drugs. It's all me. Take them home. Get my housemates to help me. One of them is holding the turtle's head with a tongue depressor. One of them is holding the leg out so I can do it. I'm there priming my little needle of turtle medication and have to inject into a creature this big pneumonia medication for the turtles. Fast forward to now, that was what, 8 years ago? The turtles are now living in a lovely pond with a friend of mine in California. Oh yeah, they moved to California. So I graduated from university in New Orleans, still have the turtles, healthy now. I know how to take care of them. They're big now because they're real. My boyfriend at the time and I decided we're going to move to Los Angeles. We rent a car. We put the turtles in the car because they can't go on planes because planes are turtle racist. So we had to drive from New Orleans to Los Angeles because I didn't want to give up the turtles. So Tennessee Williams and William Shakespeare the turtle sit on the console of this van that we rent, and we drive the van from New Orleans to Los Angeles, where they lived with me for 5 years. Then I gave them to my friend Madeline. They continue to be healthy and beautiful to this day. They live in her pond, which she like made for them because she's also an animal goddess. And, you know, she tags me in her Instagram story of them frolicking around every once in a while. So it's my story.
Yeah, she deserves to walk away. Well done. That was amazing. I loved that so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. Oh yeah, was that true?
Yeah, that was 100% true. Yes. All true.
Okay. Yeah. So people are saying, can we see the turtles? Is this possible? And then we will post them on our story as well.
So I will send you, because they're in California, my friend Madeline now has custody of them because I had to move to England. But I think there's some footage of them in her story now, so I'll tag you guys in it and you can
please do.
repost it if you want.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat with us. It was amazing. I'll make sure to link everything about the online festival that you're doing and the turtles, and I'll link your profile and everything so that everyone that was watching and everyone that can watch later can go and see. But yeah, if everyone can give her a round of applause in the comments, that'd be fantastic. You've been so great.
Thank you. And I can
Yeah.
send you links as well if people are interested in doing sort of one-on-one practitioner and methodology development workshops.
Oh,
We have
amazing.
fun exercises. They involve colored markers and like being really reflective. And if that's something anyone is interested in, reach out to me. And for East 15 students and alumni as well, I'll do a free 30-minute session if they want to reach out and get in touch. So
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, enjoy the rest of your day, whatever you decide to do, and keep us posted on those turtles because we're all definitely invested.
everyone should be. They're great. They're great little guys. They're like this big now, but they're living their
Oh,
best life. Yeah.
that's amazing. Well, have the best day. I hope that you're well. Stay
You as
safe,
well.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye.